All right. As Rob comes back in. Right. All right, we're gonna get going here. Full house here in DC. Okay, we ready? AV, ready? Okay. Welcome, everybody. I hereby call the meeting to order. This is an open meeting of the Broadcasting Board of Governors being held in compliance with the Government in the Sunshine Act. I read this every time. I should just hit a button and have the recording played back. A digital recording of this meeting will be available for on-demand viewing on the BBG website, www.bbg.gov. I was honored to be joined by all the governors and CEO Lansing yesterday in a meeting with Deputy Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Thanks, Rick, for setting it up. We actually had a wonderful meeting with Deputy Secretary. Told him a lot about what the BBG is doing. Talked a lot about what the State Department's priorities are, and really talked about how we continue to coordinate things going forward. So it was a good meeting, and I'm glad all the governors could be there. Unfortunately, Governors Aaron and Weinstein could not be here today. They had business elsewhere, but the rest of the governors are here, and we have a quorum. We have several key updates since our October board meeting, starting with a few arrivals and departures. So let me go through some of that. So first, I am very sad and also happy for him to announce the departure of Carlos Garcia Perez. Carlos, you're here somewhere. Where's Carlos? He's led Radio and TV Marti at the Office of Cuba Broadcasting for the past 5 years. He actually tried to leave and go back to the private sector a year ago, and I responded to his email with, "I'm ignoring this email." So thankfully for him and for us, he stayed on another year and was able to kind of lead this agency through the opening up of relations with Cuba. Obviously, more now, the agency is as important now as ever. Last Friday was his last day to go back to the private sector, where he's starting a new exciting venture. But I asked him to be here today as a private citizen. Carlos, thank you for all your wonderful work at OCB. We'll do something more appropriate and informal at some point, but I wanted to acknowledge you with the board. I will say that OCB is an absolutely wonderful run organization. It's a modern multimedia enterprise that benefits the lives of Cubans every day on the island. And, we can't thank you enough, Carlos, for what you did. One of the most wonderful things Carlos did, as all good leaders do, is he tried to leave us in good hands before he left the building. And very early on, I think it was maybe almost 6 months ago, he introduced me to what candidate to take over for him, and I'm pleased to announce today and warmly welcome Maria Malula Gonzalez, who's here at the table. Welcome, Malula, as our new Director of Office of Cuba Broadcasting. So welcome. This is Malula's first week. I think you started the job day before yesterday, so you're a veteran already. We're excited to bring her on board and look forward to working with her. She's precisely the person we need to leading OCB as we position our Cuba Broadcasting post-normalization. I will say what's wonderful about Malula, obviously, it's first and foremost Carlos' pick. He was a strong recommender of Malula, but I've known of your work at Univision over the years. She's a accomplished on-air and behind-the-camera journalist, both Telemundo and Univision. Actually, you've been both networks, and you've created many popular programs for Venevision out of Venezuela and the independent local station in Puerto Rico. So to have somebody like Malula who comes with Carlos's strong recommendation, a strong personality, believes in the mission from the first time we met, is very passionate, and also has tremendous journalistic chops, I think is perfect. Some people say that OCB is not needed anymore now that relations have opened up. We all know here that it's probably needed more than ever now as we proceed down the path. So we're wonderful to have you here. Malula, you want to say a couple words to everybody? I know I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know if you were prepared, but go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Shell, CEO Lansing, and governors. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and the sister networks as well. No, I'm very thankful. I mean, this opportunity coming from media, having the opportunity to serve your country by doing what you love the most, it's amazing. What's not easy is coming behind Carlos Garcia, because I think I have big shoes to fill. Carlos have done a great job. But when we started this conversation, he said to me, would you take this to the next level? And I think that's what I'm here for. I plan to do that, and I have a commitment with him and all of you, the country of the United States and Cuba as well, Cubans as well. Thank you. Thank you.
So let me put you on the spot really quickly before we
Okay.
go on the meeting. One of the wonderful things about this delay of letting Carlos stay on a little bit longer between when you were first interested in the job and today is that you got to go to Cuba, which as the head of OCB, they don't let you on the island that easily. So your
That is
days of
correct.
traveling to Cuba for the time being, hopefully not forever, are over. I think you recently went to Cuba, right? You want to say a word or two about what you found there? And
Yeah, that is correct. The good thing about having a name like Maria Gonzalez, you can go anywhere in the world. That's why I go by Malule, just to be. Yes, I did went to Cuba. I thought when we were during the conversations, I thought I need to know, and I took the opportunity because as many other people are going now as tourists. So it was an amazing experience because you can feel the change, and people are looking forward, to this change and hopeful. So for me, it was very insightful to see everything, but they lack and they have a big need of information. And it's even worse because now they have limited access to internet, but they do have it. So when you see hundreds of people sitting in front of your hotel, not because there's a rock star coming out of it, just because they're internet, so they're just going into the Wi-Fi. So it's like when in the past we all saw technology improving in the U.S. and you will see someone with a new device, no, you would look like, oh my God, that's something I want to have. So I think that's how it is. So I think digital plays a big role in what we do next, and as well as radio, because then you have the two generations, no? The ones that are very faithful, and Radio Marti has been doing such a great job. And then we have the big challenges that comes from TV, which I know we can also work on that, maybe in different platforms in a different way, not traditional linear TV, but that's happening even in this country. So, that's something that I was very surprised, and it looks great that they're looking for so much information, and we're there to provide it.
well, we're very fortunate to have you on here, and
Thank
thanks
you.
to John
Thank
and
you.
Rob for getting this over the finish line here. I think it's great. So, on another note, there are some people at BBG behind the scenes that do a lot that you never hear about, and one of those people that we all know that's not quite public all the time, but one of our go-to people has been Dan Shribney, who has been invaluable to BBG and also to Rick and to past undersecretaries, actually, to Tara and those. He just recently retired from the State Department. His last day was December 11th. He reported to Rick and served as senior advisor on BBG and was our main contact over the last couple of years. He's worked closely with all the BBG entities. He's worked closely with John since he started, and we like him personally and professionally. And he's on a much-deserved vacation today, or else he would have been here too. And we'll have him at a future board meeting. But publicly, on behalf of the board and everybody else here, we want to wish Dan the best in his future endeavors, and we'll have a chance to say that personally to him when he comes back. Dan's successor, Josh Lipsky, is here with us today somewhere. Where's Josh? He's in Annapolis. So Dan's successor, Josh Lipsky, intended to be here today. So I've met Josh. Josh is wonderful. He's a great addition. He's going to be here at the next board meeting, I hope. And we look forward to working with Josh to further with our collaboration with the State Department under Rick's kind of leadership. So I don't know if Rick, if you want to say anything or about Dan or Josh.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Shell. Dan has been a vital and important addition to the state relationship with the board. He is a vast repository of knowledge about BBG lore and byways, and we have to figure out how to use some of that institutional knowledge. Josh is a young new addition to my staff. I think he passed the Maryland bar exam, and I guess today is the ceremony. So I said you made the right choice about going there. But he will be a great addition, and He actually reports to Ramesh Ratnazar, who is sitting behind me right there, who will kind of be overseeing our relationship too. So we look forward to many, many more happy meetings to come.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
So I'm glad you recognize Dan. Dan has been terrific. He was a contractor after being WAE, after retiring for the Foreign Service, yeah. So there's a chance we could.
No one retires.
No, they don't. But just second, that I've known Dan for, I don't know, maybe 7 years, and he has been absolutely terrific in facilitating both our and public diplomacy as well as BBG. So it was a surprise, and I wish him all the best. He's been a terrific contributor to not just BBG, but to state as well. So it's a terrific asset, but look forward to staying in touch and hope he gets back here.
Welcome to his unretirement, and Amesh, welcome too. Okay, just a couple other quick things. I think many of you know Director of Global Strategy Rob Bull resigned on November 17th to accept a kind of an exciting new position at the New York Times. It feels like a million years ago when we had our troika, or what do we call you, Andre? You,
Troika's one of the names.
yeah. So, now that we have kind of this new team in place, it does feel like a long time ago, but there was, the three people that really got this agency through a very difficult time to where we are today, Andre, Susie, and Rob. I wish Rob could be here today, but he started his new job. Rob is another one who tried to resign to me a couple times and who I ignored. He wanted to go off and take a sabbatical for a year, and I ignored that, and instead he stayed here. Once again, we'll have him at a future board meeting as well when his new job permits, but Rob has been an incredible contributor to BBG. He was brought over originally, I believe, by Walter, who promised him it would be a quick detail and he would be back to the private sector, and he stayed for, I believe, 5 years, and had a tremendous impact on this place, and I consider him a friend and wish him the best of luck, and I know he's having an exciting new challenge at the New York Times. So if you want to go back to the private sector but also stay in journalism and the public good, New York Times is probably a pretty good place to land, and his family loves it up in New York. So, Rob, we wish you the best, and we'll have him back here. And for some time now, John's remaking our senior team here, and we haven't had a single person handling our congressional functions. And I'm really excited today to announce that Alana Fritschke, Alana, you're here somewhere, right? There you are, right behind me. Perfect. Is our new Director of Congressional Affairs. When I first heard Alana's name, a couple people that should remain unnamed says, "Oh, you'll never get her from the MCC. She's a rock star. She's never going to come to BBG." But there's a new day in BBG. Apparently, we're the new hot place to work, and so, Alana, welcome. We need you. So, John, I don't know if you want to say a couple words about Alana.
Oh, well, to welcome Alana to our team. She brings a great deal of expertise in our legislative affairs area for strategy around our legislative affairs. She comes from the MCC, where she was very highly regarded, and prior to that, she was with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so that experience will serve us well. So welcome, Ilana.
Okay, so that's it for the new people. I think, each meeting, hopefully we'll add to our new people here. It's great. So very quickly before I turn it over to our CEO, I want to do what we traditionally do and talk about the threats to our journalists, which hopefully one day we'll have a board meeting where I won't be able to talk about that, but unfortunately each board meeting it appears it's as bad as ever. In fact, this week the Committee to Protect Journalists released its annual report and found the threats to the press in China have reached an unprecedented level, with a record number of journalists behind bars there. I'm sorry to report that our own journalists and their families are being threatened there, in addition to other places around the world. Sopa Gyatso has worked for RFA's Tibetan service for more than 5 years, reporting from India on unrest in China's Tibetan region, a topic deemed sensitive and tightly controlled by Chinese authorities. We recently learned that Mr. Gyatso's 70-year-old father, who lives in China's Tibetan region, has been detained since November 25th by Chinese authorities in connection with his work at RFA. His son's work at RFA. Authorities have pressured the father to call his son and urge him to stop his work and return to his hometown, a journey which Chinese authorities say they would arrange. This detainment follows several years' visits, summons, and threats by Chinese authorities since 2011 over his son's connection to RFA. We are concerned about Mr. Guaizo's father's well-being and health, as well as the safety of other members of his family in China. He has also started receiving threatening calls from authorities to his home in India. Radio Free Asia reporter Shoshet Hoshur continues to await information on the fate of his brothers, two of whom were jailed in China in retaliation from Shoret's extensive coverage of both escalating ethnic Uyghur tensions and the Chinese government's crackdown on the mostly Muslim minority in the country's far west. In September, Shoret testified on Capitol Hill and spoke with Secretary of State John Kerry about the matter. The board continues to call for the release of his brothers. Elsewhere in Turkmenistan, a correspondent for RFERL's Turkmen service remains in detention. He's been held since July. And earlier this month, we unfortunately saw the one-year anniversary, which is shocking, of the arrest and imprisonment of Hadija Ismailova, investigative reporter and contributor to RFERL's Azerbaijan service. Hadija was imprisoned on December 5th, 2014, on charges that are widely regarded as retribution by Azeri authorities for continuing reporting exposing corruption among the country's leadership. She is serving an outrageous 7.5-year sentence. This abhorrent disregard for basic freedoms must end, and on behalf of the board, we call for Hadija to be released immediately. And we discussed this yesterday with Deputy Secretary Blinken as well, and I think everybody everywhere in the government is doing whatever we can to get Hadija out of prison. It's terrible. The threats, this is just a couple, by the way, the threats to our journalists face across the world, not just in the places. I should mention one other thing. We also have reports of 2 Voice of America stringers in Burundi being harassed, I guess a third yesterday, and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty reporters in Crimea and Kazakhstan being threatened. 2 independent journalists who contribute to the Martis were also detained and threatened in Havana. So the threats to these journalists face underscores the importance of their work, and we'll continue to fight to protect our journalists as they put their lives at risk every single day to protect the freedom of information. So with that, let me turn to the business before the board today. We have a couple things. The presence of 5 or more governors, I think we have 6 here today, satisfies the board's quorum requirement, and a quorum being present, the board may conduct business based on majority vote. On December 2nd, the board received by email materials for the consent agenda, which allowed sufficient time for all governors to review the agenda prior to this meeting. I didn't get any comments from any of the governors. This month's consent agenda includes resolutions honoring the many decades of service of VOA's French to Africa service and Spanish service, as well as a resolution honoring the first anniversary of Current Time, the joint production of VOA and RFERL. At this time, before we vote on the consent agenda, we also have a resolution honoring Carlos. I know we heard from Malule really quickly. Carlos, do you want to say a couple words really quickly to the board?
Can I speak from here? Or?
Come up to a microphone. I don't know if we have anybody on the line, but come up to the microphone. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all the board members and all my colleagues here for all the praises that I receive after I announced my resignation. But I think the Marti's transformation is really a win for the BBG. It's not really a Marti win. I think it speaks a lot about this agency. I think it speaks a lot of the talent that we have in this agency. And so I think it's a win for all of us. It's not my individual win nor the men and women that worked at the Martis. I also think it's a big win for the people of Cuba. I think we have journalists on the ground today, paid by us. We have content generators inside Cuba today that have done a fantastic job and that helped us a lot to become successful. So it's really a group effort. I don't say that to be political. I'm not very political. I'm saying because I really feel that way. So thank you to all of you here in the BBG, my colleagues. I'm gonna miss you guys. We're funny coming together, and then I'm leaving, I know. But Malula it's an upgrade, so, you guys will be fine. But thank you. Thank you for being great colleagues. And John, thanks for getting us together. I appreciate that. I do have a couple stories before I leave, because then it'll be boring, right? I still remember the first time, I came to this job, and we were talking about this at dinner last night, not because of the money, because I wanted to do it. And I'm having this conversation with Jeff Trimble, which at the time was I think the director of IBB. I don't know what the title was. And he tells me, look, Carlos, we're negotiating the salary. And he tells me, you're going to get a $7,000 bonus on a yearly basis. You'll have to be an idiot not to get it. All right, fine, Jeff, that's all good. 6 months after that, President Obama passes a resolution, the political appointees cannot get a bonus. So that makes me an idiot, That was like, I'll never forget that, right? Then the other thing that I really remember a lot is we went to the Hill, and I'm not going to mention the representatives that we went. It was Jeff Trimble and Susan Andrews, and we had a huge congressional delegation in front of us, and it was a contested matter, as a lot of things with the Martis are, and I've never knew that a human being can stop breathing like Jeff Trimble did for 20 minutes during the conversation, and Susan Andrews too. It was a great meeting, and Jeff, when he left, told me, I was trying to rewrite my resume as you were having this conversation. So, I mean, I have a lot of good memories. Brian Conniff once told me 2 years ago, the first time I heard you speak, and Brian has been here for a long time, and he's seen all the different OCB directors. He said, he thought, well, he's not going to last more than a year here. It's going to be difficult. So anyways, I have a lot of great memories from this place, and I leave a changed man. But Mr. Chairman, I want to talk a little bit about the future of the Martis, if I may, okay? I think it's important that, and by the way, congratulations to this board, because I think the Martis have been under more pressure. It doesn't have to do with the money or the budget this last year because of the change in the relationship. No question about that. And you guys have been phenomenal. I have never gotten a call from you guys, slow it down. To the contrary, it was like, keep doing what you're doing. So I'm very proud to be part of this institution because of what you guys have done and the support that you gave me. But it's very important to understand that the director of the Martis should not be perceived as a leader of the Cuban exile community. It's not. She is a member of the BBG and of the U.S. government. I think that's very important. I think it's also very important to understand that the Martis are not part of the Democracy Development Program of the State Department. We're not. Other entities here in the BBG take money from state for different programs and are not perceived as such. So I think those 2 points going forward are very important. And the Martis have 3 important assets that I hope nobody ever forgets. Number one, our journalists have a great relationship with the people of Cuba. For the last 30 years, they trust our journalists in Miami. And the journalists in Miami are developing great trust with the journalists that we have on the ground now. I think that's very important. Number two, the news business of the Martis are about news. We can do programs, and we can continue to do programs. And Malule, I can warn you that they're going to try to direct you to programs to make you irrelevant. But the cornerstone of the Martis is news. We need the programs because we need to be a full station. But really, the journalistic standards that our journalists adhere to are second to none in the industry. And that's very important. And third is the distribution. Nobody has the distribution that the Martis have on the island. All of this, what makes is a very strong brand. A brand that I suggest very respectfully that is used for other parts of the hemisphere. And I'm not getting into the VOA business. That's not it. There's two different missions. And Mr. Chairman, you asked me, I think it was February of last year, how would the Martis look like going forward? And this board has a document that Malule has a copy where it lays out what the Martis should look like going to the future. And yes, Cuba is important. And we need to understand the historical context of the Cuban Revolution within the region and expanding the Marti brand and using the Martin brand in Latin America to connect the human rights activists, to connect communities in the digital space is very important, and not limit the Martis to a political boundary. The digital space has erased the political boundaries. There are no more political boundaries in the digital space. So that's in many ways how I see the future. December 17th, which is tomorrow, Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I can't thank you enough for ignoring me. Because if I would have left, and it was 18 months ago, when I wanted to leave, I would have been kicking myself if I was not here during this period. So thank you so much for that. But yesterday will be December 17th, so last year, December 17th of last year, I was sitting in the airplane in Miami, coming to Washington, an early flight, and I get a text message, call me. And when I call, they tell me Alan Gross is on the plane. I was jumping up and down that plane, but nobody knew who Alan Gross was. So I was celebrating by myself for 2.5 hours. And that was like a change, right? A game changer in what we do. And it was great. I mean, I'm so glad that I was part of that. We had a meeting last week with State, Undersecretary Stengel, which I think was a historic meeting for this institution. We met with all the folks of WHA. We had a fantastic meeting. It's a meeting that took me, I never asked for the meeting, but I actually took 5 years to get it. But it was great, right? Because I think the institution is starting to gain a lot of credibility within the federal government. I think a lot of people are starting to understand that the Martis are a very important asset to the United States, not only for the Cuban exile community in Miami. So thanks to your folks at State. It was a wonderful meeting. I let it rip because I'm leaving, so they can't fire me. And I set the stage for Malule. But thank you so much. So that's what I have to say. Look, thank you so much. Again, I'm a different man. I was a trial lawyer for 23 years. I can't even see myself doing that right now. That's so far away. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a public servant. I always wanted to be a public servant. And you call me Thursday at 7:30 at night, and I was at the office. It was a great call when your boss calls you, you're about to leave, and it's 7:30 at night, and you're still holding the fort, right? So that's how much I like this job. So anyways, and I leave you with Malule. I think Malule is great. Malule's been part of my kitchen cabinets for, 6 years. She's helped me in every stage of the game, and I'm sure she's going to take this to the next level. So thank you so much, and congratulations to all of you for the great success of the Martis.
Last a year or two, Carlos. It's sad to see you leave, but also we're very excited for you as you go to your next adventure. Get to spend more time rooting for the Miami Heat too. And I've got to know Carlos's family too, and it's a wonderful family, and get to have you back a little bit, so it's kind of nice. And Malula, now you're officially welcome. We won't talk about Carlos anymore.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, back to the consent agenda. Before we've gone, hours into the meeting, we haven't even heard from our leader, CEO Lansing, yet. So we got to get through this. But two things to do. So first of all, we have the consent agenda. Is there any comments on the consent agenda from any of the governors? Is there a movement to approve the consent agenda? Move, Mr. Governor Kempner. Second, Governor Kornblue. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Consent agenda carried. So, I want to talk about one other thing for a second that was not on the agenda a week ago, but we made a lot of progress when we put it on the agenda for the board meeting today and do this in public. We had originally planned to have a discussion here on the recommendations of the Special Committee on Internet Anti-Censorship, which was created in March 2014 to establish clear program objectives, devise a process for utilizing IAC funds, and set up straightforward processes for oversight of IAC activities and construct processes for measurement and evaluation. The IAC committee, which convened by phone on Monday under the leadership of Governor Kornblue, considered the Internet Freedom Framework and government's documents. This time I'd like to ask Governor Kornblue to quickly brief the board on what's happened and what we've gotten to and where we sit here today.
Thank you, Chairman Chell. The OIG had reported and given the BBG a number of recommendations on reforms to our grant making in regards to internet freedom, and we decided to take that as an opportunity rather than a problem to introduce more transparency and accountability to the program. So we've started that process with a framework document as recommended by the OIG very wisely to lay out what the BBG's goals are for the program and what kinds of projects should be funded. And what we wanted to do was build on the great work that's been done already, to recognize it and to regularize it a little bit. So that's encompassed in a framework document that should lay out our thoughts for future folks who want to get the funding, for Congress, for anyone who's worried about the use of these taxpayer funds. And then there's a separate document that lays out our process for handling the internet freedom funding and for directing the monies to priorities as laid out in the framework and as may change during the year thanks to work that the CEO will do. So the governance document lays out a very clear process, and it's up to the CEO to implement that and to interpret it as he goes forward and creates an office that'll oversee the whole process. And I think the role of the BBG going forward will be, this board will be to provide oversight and to get regular reports that indicate how the funding is being used and how it's being, how it's furthering the goals as laid out in the framework, and that should lay out everybody's appropriate responsibilities, provide the requisite kind of oversight, and ensure that the program doesn't have too much bureaucracy, still has the flexibility it needs. So we hope that we've struck a great balance, and I just want to thank not only CEO Lansing, whose leadership meant that we could get it over the finish line, but also Dave Kligerman, who did incredible amounts of work. Governor Weinstein, who's not here today, who shepherded it before as chair of this committee. Governor Kempner, who provided a lot of intellectual heft, and then of course Libby Liu, who's really the I don't want to say the mother of this program, but really has developed quite an impressive and creative program. Anything else you wanted on that? Good.
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
Good. Thanks, Karen. I wanted to say a couple words about it as well. Let me just hit this off so I don't get feedback. So I think you said it perfectly. And this is what we've been doing recently as an organization. We took something the IG had told us was a deficiency for us, and we turned it into an opportunity. This is one of these things where when you talk about the stuff that we've done, and I really, hats off to Libby and Andre, who are really, kind of got this thing going. But when you go around to the Hill and you talk to senators or congressmen and you talk about what we're doing, it doesn't matter what party they are, it doesn't matter what their background is. There are some people, I consider myself one of them, that believe if you're on the internet, you are free, uncensored, open to go wherever you want. Now, there's bad stuff on the internet and there's good stuff on the internet, but that's the same as in the press too. If there's freedom of information and freedom of the press, you have your choice as an individual, a free individual, to choose what you believe and what you don't believe. And Malila talked about the people outside of her hotel getting Wi-Fi. It's a perfect example. So this is a perfect example of a program that started here at the BBG, that the interest in the funding got ahead of the structure. And now with this incredible work that's been done over the past 6 months, we've had the structure catch up with it. So now that we have a framework and a governance process that Congress, if they see fit, can give us a lot more funding for this program, because we need more funding for this program. It's a drop in the bucket for what other people are spending around the world, and so now it's important we have a structure around it. I want to add my thanks. I mean, Karen, you did wonderful work here, tons and tons of work. So thank you for your leadership on this. Matt, I know you put in a ton of time on this too, so thank you for your leadership. Dave, let me add my thanks to you. And then, of course, Libby, thanks for all the time, not just managing this program, but in getting us over the finish line. So really wonderful thing. We sent out the final documents, I believe 48 hours ago, Dave, or 2 nights ago, to the board. I know I've talked to each board member, and I know every board member's read them. So we have them in front of us. Are there any comments on the documents or on this from anybody before we proceed to a vote? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the IAC committee, the framework and governance documents? Move, Governor Armstrong, is there a second? Second to Governor Kempner. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, thank you for your work, and we don't have this in the, Dave, let me see here, we don't have this in the agenda, but at this point, we should probably dissolve the committee, right?
That's an option, if you'd like to do it at this point.
Yeah. Hornblue moves to dissolve the IAC committee. Is there a second? Matt, second, Governor Crocker. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you for your work, committee, and you certainly did do a lot of work here. I want to say one last thing before I turn it over, John, to you. We have a couple other housekeeping issues, but last thing about OCB, because I know we've talked a lot about OCB this morning, but was watching Meet the Press last Sunday, and obviously the war against ISIS in the Middle East is an important challenge for our country and for this organization. And we had dinner as the governors and spent a lot of time talking about that last night. I know Rick and our colleagues at State have spent a lot of time on it. But when I started the board, Marti was held up as kind of the example of something that wasn't well run. We had an airplane, I guess, sitting in a hangar, or 2 airplanes. And people said, God, BBG is, just look at the Martis if you want to see how poorly run it is. And that place has been transformed in the last 5 years, and to the point where Meet the Press on Sunday, there was a discussion between Chuck Todd and Senator Rubio about how to counter ISIS and how information and diplomacy was as important, if not more important, than the military options. And I think one of them said, well, Marti has worked in Cuba. What are we going to do in the Middle East? So I know we're doing a lot of work in the Middle East, Brian, you and VOA and everybody else, but it was just I was proud of me to hear one of our services used as an example of something. So, talk to Rick over here after the meeting.
Listen, I'm an entrepreneur now, so I need work. I need clients.
Okay. So, my dream as chairman is that at some point we will have 10 members of the public here to speak, because that's our limit. We've never gotten to our limit. Today we have 3 here. I guess it's the holidays, so this would be the wrong meeting to have 10, but I think we actually have 2 members of the public here to speak. Let me invite the first one, Adam Powell from USC, go Trojans, to the table to say a couple words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director Lansing, members. My name is Adam Powell. I'm president of the Public Diplomacy Council, and I'm a senior fellow at the University of Southern California. But this morning I speak as an individual. These views are my own and not of these or any other institution. Events of the past week present serious issues for both Voice of America and Radio Free Asia. The sale of the South China Morning Post represents a significant step forward in China's use of media and communication tools. Until now, Beijing has relied on such outlets as China Daily and CCTV, which, to be polite, have had mixed success in circulation and influence. The acquisition of Hong Kong's leading newspaper with the explicit goal of creating more positive coverage of Beijing is a qualitative strengthening of China's messaging. The South China Morning Post will not become the Hong Kong edition of the People's Daily, but there will be less coverage of human rights and other issues viewed as troublesome in Beijing. That is the explicit stated goal of this transaction. Given the vast resources of the Chinese government and, as in this case, of Chinese companies eager to demonstrate their support of the government, it is not unreasonable to expect similar moves in the future. China could make the Sulzberger family an offer so lucrative they could not refuse for the international edition of the New York Times. They could agree to rename it, say, the Herald Tribune. They could continue to rely on reporting from the New York Times correspondents, but there would be less coverage of human rights and other issues viewed as troublesome in Beijing. Maybe later they could buy the Times as well, and why not CNN? The initials are already perfect. Beijing's government media already have far more resources than Congress will ever authorize for your programs. And with the resources and perhaps now the will to acquire leading Western media, Beijing would appear to enjoy a commanding presence. So what to do? Commit great journalism, of course, but more. Leverage your brand. You, who represent America abroad must represent the core values of America abroad, and you start with one stark contrast between America and so much of the world, including China and North Korea and Russia and Iran and Cuba and ISIS. That contrast is in the simplicity and power of a single word: freedom. We believe in free and open access to news, information, and media of all kinds. They do not. This was our advantage during the Cold War, and it is your advantage today. Freedom is your core value, your brand, your calling card around the world. You can say, you don't have to listen to us, but you should have the ability to listen to us, or to anyone else you want. And you should have the ability to criticize or support or make fun of whoever you want. Director Lansing's plans for a new Office of Internet Freedom and the work of Andre Mendez and his colleagues over the years really are very much a part of this. This is a great positioning move. To return quickly to current events, earlier today a major internet conference began in China. China's cyber chief said as he prepared for the forum, China's internet censorship promotes freedom. Freedom is our goal. Order is our means. George Orwell could not have said it better. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. And let me also welcome Joseph Noonan to the table from QSIP.
Good morning. The Committee for United States International Broadcasting appreciates the efforts undertaken by BBG Chairman Jeff Shell and CEO John Lansing to improve the Broadcasting Board of Governors. Therefore, we were more than surprised that in testimony before the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, you both argued that the current oversight arrangement for BBG media entities is sufficient and that one CEO with enhanced powers can handle it all. That is clearly not the case. Individual entities need much more independent and focused oversight, which one board and one CEO simply cannot provide. They have distinct missions which require different sets of experiences. Surrogate media outreach combined with providing a forum for opinions is not compatible in many ways with global news outreach, and global news outreach is not always compatible with public diplomacy. Countering propaganda is, again, something different. The old model of separate missions was highly successful during the War of Ideas of the Cold War. Hillary Clinton described the new one-board BBG model as practically defunct. The Inspector General pointed out that it represents a conflict of interest because it does. While Mr. Lansing may be an excellent manager, the next CEO may not be. Even for Mr. Lansing, it would be next to impossible to be or to become an expert in counter-propaganda, foreign policy, public diplomacy, U.S. news, and international news. We saw some truly bad entity heads being appointed by the single BBG board in the past. It took the part-time board members months and even years to replace them. A single CEO is not an institutional reform. Therefore, we must agree with the former BBG member, the Honorable Enders Wimbush, that there is a leadership crisis at the BBG, and it will remain unless there is a legislative solution and a major structural reform. We hope Mr. Shell and Mr. Lansing will reconsider their opposition to the key reform provision of the bipartisan H.R. 2323 bill that has been supported by all members of the House of Foreign Affairs Committee. CUSIB welcomes Maria Module Gonzalez as the new director of the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, and we wish our best to outgoing director Carlos Garcia Perez. CUSIB urges the board to address the concerns of RFE-RL journalist Christina Gorelick and former RL talent Anastasia Kirilenko. CUSIB is deeply saddened by the news of the death of former VOA director Evelyn Lieberman, who will be remembered for her defense of Voice of America's editorial independence in the airing in 1997 of an interview with Chinese dissident Wei Jiangchang. CUSIB supports the excellent work that has been done at Radio Free Asia and will continue to press for more funds for surrogate broadcasts and for less U.S. taxpayer resources going towards BBG bureaucracy. CUSIB remains determined to increase shortwave and medium wave radio broadcasts to China and Tibet, and will oppose the reduction and elimination of these services. We invite all board members to contact us so we can meet in New York to discuss this further. Thank you. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year to all.
Thanks, Joseph, and thanks for being here. Okay, so finally, let me turn it over to our fearless leader, John Lansing, for his report. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. You recall I initiated at our last meeting 5 themes that have formed the framework for a lot of the work we've been doing over the last 3 months. I wanted to briefly go over those 5 themes, beginning with an aggressive shift to digital, mobile, and social, which we've had some very positive advancements in to date. The strategic cooperation among the 5 BBG entities, and I will report more specifically and in detail in just a minute as to how that manifests itself based on a trip I recently took to Ukraine. Targeting key spheres that are aligned with U.S. foreign policy, doing more things in fewer places, increasing curation and acquisition of content, and producing less original so that we can have the most impact with our original content. And importantly, and the 5th theme is to measure ourselves based on the impact we're having around the world beyond just the reach. But before I get to my report on my trip to Ukraine, I wanted to take a minute, and because later today we're honoring the 5 Burke Award recipients, and I wanted to highlight the 5 recipients here for you. The David Burke Awards are the highest award the BBG gives, and it is for integrity, bravery, and excellence in pursuit of professional, uncensored, and objective journalism. I would say that these 5 winners are among probably the best we've had in many years based on what I've learned. So beginning with Radio Free Asia, and you just mentioned Shoret Hoshur from the Uyghur Service for his excellent and exclusive reporting on the conflict in Xinjiang province, despite the threats to his families that Chairman Schell has just outlined. And while I'm on Radio Free Asia, Libby just had a chance to pass me a note that one of our Vietnamese in-country bloggers was arrested yesterday. So the danger that our journalists are facing around the world is ever present, and their courage is remarkable. From Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the Burke Award this year will go to the staff of the Azerbaijani Services Baku Bureau for their revealing investigative reporting in the face of beatings, the closure of their bureau, and the Azeri government's general antipathy towards the work that they're doing there. I met this group when I was in Prague, and they are continuing the work they're doing from the Prague Bureau and continuing to have major impact in Azerbaijan. From the Middle East Broadcasting Networks, the winner of the David Burke Award this year includes the producers of Al Hurra's Delusional Paradise and the compelling and powerful series that provides a voice for the living victims of violent extremism, the families that are left behind. Incredible work done by the Middle East Broadcasting Network. And from the Office of Cuba Broadcasting, a man who I've met on a couple of occasions when visiting there with Carlos, Jose Alpizar, for his ingenuity and dedication in developing an effective and extremely successful distribution system for Marti content in Cuba. And then from Voice of America, an incredibly courageous journalist, Ibrahim Ahmed from the Hausa Service for his reporting from Boko Haram targeted territory in northeast Nigeria. This is a gentleman who has slept for a year in a different place every night over the course of a year to keep himself safe while covering for Voice of America the advances of Boko Haram. These awards not only recognize excellence in journalism, they also demonstrate the fulfillment of our mission to inform, engage, and connect people around the world in support of freedom and democracy. And I hope everyone who can will join us today at 1 o'clock for these awards downstairs in the VOA briefing room. It will also be a live stream on the BBG website. So maybe a round of applause for those winners. So now Out of my trip to Prague and Kiev, and Jeff Trimble, who accompanied me, thank you very much for your help on this trip, saw firsthand how VOA, a federal entity, and Voice and RFERL, a grantee, are working together collaboratively to impact areas in Eastern Europe in such a positive way. I was very impressed with the sense of mission and focus when I was at RFE, and they nod. Your leadership at RFERL was very evident there. The expansion into digital, particularly Digim and the Pangea team, was one very impressive demonstration that I received while at the RFERL headquarters. The joint production of Current Time that is produced both in Prague and Washington on a daily basis is the most visible and effective example of cooperation between the BBG entities. There are those that think that it's hard to manage the 5 entities collectively and strategically, and the evidence that I see in Eastern Europe is that it's quite effective. Programs that brings together RFE and RL and VOA now airs Current Time in 9 countries on the Russian periphery via 25 media outlets, and the program includes roughly half produced from this very building at 3rd and Independence, and the other half out of our Prague bureau, Prague office. Interestingly, it live streams in Russia online and garners up to 2 million daily viewers in Russia, and the average age of those viewers, based on our research, is 15 to 24. Also in Prague, I had the opportunity to meet with U.S. Ambassador Andrew Shapiro, along with leading Czech journalists and political analysts, just to gain a wider and broader perspective on issues in the region. I saw and heard from Ukrainian officials when I visited Kiev about the vitally important contribution that VOA and RFE-RL are making in support of Ukraine's fledgling democracy, and really to balance the relentless propaganda coming from Moscow. A very interesting meeting with Dmytro Shimkiv, deputy head of the presidential administration, to discuss how we can co-produce a project for helping Ukrainians learn to speak English. President Poroshenko announced 2016 would be the year of speaking English in Ukraine, and they've turned to us at VOA because of our expertise in this area, and we intend to work closely with them to help them succeed at that project. I also met with Ms. Hannah Hopko, who is the Parliament's Committee on Foreign Affairs chairman. So think of our chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. This is his counterpart in Ukraine. She told me, and I actually wrote this down, so I wanted to repeat it to you. She said, RFE and RL, coupled with VOA, provide the truth and objective information that is so much needed in Ukraine today. She went on to say, show things as they are, or she said VOA and RFE-RL show things as they are and set a standard of professionalism for Ukrainian media outlets. I also had the opportunity to meet with U.S. Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt, briefed on the embassy's perspective, but he was remarkably supportive of the work that we're doing in Kiev and Ukraine. From these and other meetings, it's clear that through the combination of VOA and RFE-RL, the BBG is having a significant impact in supporting the young, fledgling democracy of Ukraine, particularly now as it struggles with Russian-backed coercion on its eastern border and in Crimea. VOA, Ukraine, and RFE-RL work cooperatively and strategically in another interesting way. Through 2 programs, one from VOA, called Prime Time, featuring Miroslava Gongatsa, which is represents the international policies and the U.S. perspective around Ukraine so that people understand the issues that are both international and U.S. concerns. She's the most prominent journalist in Ukraine. It'd be like walking down the street with Tom Brokaw in the United States. I walked down the streets of Kiev with Miroslava, and she was known by all. And she works right here in this building. And then Miroslava, not only being one of the most highly respected journalists in all of Ukraine, has a colleague in the Kiev bureau, and it's producing local coverage through a new investigative unit called Schemes. And Schemes does local reporting in Kiev, uncovering corruption in local government. So we have from the VOA international and national coverage with a U.S. perspective, and from the Kiev Bureau of RFE-RL, we have local coverage, investigative reporting that's making a difference every day. The leader of that unit, Schemes, is Natalie Sedlesta, And she leads the unit, and I've seen her in action, and the reports she's putting together with her team would truly be remarkable on any media outlet in the United States. So together, they're having that impact, and what I thought I'd do is put a tape together. It's about 1:30 that will illustrate how these two programs work together in Ukraine.
In Ukraine, the Kiev Bureau is producing 6 half-hour video programs, including for the first public TV channel. Reverberations continue following a March report by the investigative program Schemes. It shined a light on a regional governor accused of using his political ties to enhance his business empire. A Ukrainian service journalist asked the oligarch why he had led a group of armed, masked men into the headquarters of a state oil company. The response? An expletive-filled rant against the journalist and RFERL. Days later, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko demanded an apology and then fired the governor. At the same time, Poroshenko also ordered private militias, like the one controlled by the oligarch, to be integrated into the Ukrainian military.
Voice of America's programming, available on 4 major national television channels, reaches 6.7 million adult Ukrainians weekly. It's the most widely distributed source of news, information, and analysis regarding the United States and global and American perspectives on domestic issues. VOA's newest newsmaker interview program, Prime Time with Miroslava Gonzalez, is now seen by more than 4 million viewers.
Ukraine is pretty high on that list. But now there's a sense that they're building something fundamentally different, and we want to support that.
The fact is that countries that make their own independent choice find problems with the Russian Federation.
Yes, there's corruption. Yes, there are issues in Ukraine. But still, I really believe that the West could be doing more.
So I'm particularly proud to welcome Miroslava and Natalie here to the meeting today, and I offer a chance for them to stand up and be recognized. Thank you. So for those that would say that it's difficult or impossible to manage entities that are both federal and grantees strategically for the greatest impact, I offer that as one of many examples. Speaking of that, updating you on our meeting with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I, along with Chairman Schell and Governor Weinstein, testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And thanks to Chairman Corker for inviting us. I had an excellent meeting one-on-one with Chairman Corker about 2 weeks prior to the hearing. And they were welcoming for us, and we had a great opportunity to testify there. I'll be following up that meeting with one-on-one meetings set up with the other members. We had, Chairman Corker was in the chair and in attendance for the entire hearing. We had 6 to 7 senators in the hearing, but we'll plan on following up with each one individually. And then just wrapping up, outreach. Since October's board meeting, I've engaged heavily on both outward facing and inward facing communications. My goal is to seek as much input as possible from various constituencies. I had the opportunity to speak before the Public Diplomacy Council, thanks to Mr. Powell sitting in the back, and on December 2nd to the U.S. Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy. And then internally, we've been working very hard to build the communications channels. Internally, I've had the opportunity, as I mentioned, to be in Prague, but also spent some time with Radio Free Asia, MBN, certainly VOA, and with Carlos at OCB. And I end my report by simply saying, Chairman Schell and members of the Board of Governors, that the passion and sense of mission at all of our news operations, both the headquarters and the bureaus that I visited, is something that we would all, I am proud of, and I know you would be proud of. I know you are proud of it. It's the best in my 35, 40 years in journalism. It really marks the best individual commitment to positive outcomes based on professional journalism that I've ever seen. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thanks for your leadership. We're very fortunate to have not only you here, but your passion as well. So it's great. And welcome, Miroslava and Natalie. Thanks for being here. We are going to take a 5-minute break right now. It's in the book for 15, but we're going to just go 5 because we're behind schedule because I've been talking too much. And when we return, we're going to hear a deeper dive into Radio Free Asia. Right? We had a potluck lunch yesterday, which we'll lead off and talk about that, but no breakfast for me today.